Good morning, April 27, 2019. I'm going to talk today about a couple actually of the interviews I've done as when I was a hard news journalist. I would also write features in the genre of hard news, but as well as just news in general. And a good friend of mine, many of us from high school, Mark Harleman. Mark, you man, you know I love you, man. We were tight in school. We don't see each other as much, but we talk all the time. And it's good to have you out there, man. And Mark had said, it'd be good to talk about some of the interviews. I've interviewed a lot of people who are known. Henry T. King, a prosecutor at Nuremberg, and was the chair of the North American War Crimes Tribunal when Kosovo and all that was going on. And Ralph Nader. Of course, yeah, I got to see Bush and Kerry and all those people, but they weren't one-on-one interviews. And today I want to talk a little bit about my interviews at Bowling Green State University. I was working for the Bowling Green Sentinel Tribune, and my interviews with Edward Teller and Enrico Fermi, who built the bomb with Oppenheimer from the Manhattan Project in Chicago all the way through Los Alamos to the Trinity test, and of course the bombing of Japan, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Now, the reality is the bomb was only tested once before we used it. The Trinity test at Los Alamos was the one and only test of an atomic bomb. And at that point, we knew we could do it, so we set it up and took the two bombs. I think they're called Fat Man and Little Boy, and one is long and slender. You can see them at the Wright-Patterson Air Force Museum on the edge of Dayton-Fairborn. And they've got the bombs there, so you can see what they look like before we drop them, because after you drop them, it looks way different. Ask the priests of Hiroshima, right? Pearl Harbor evokes pain and suffering on a huge level and provokes us to end it. Took a minute. The war in the Pacific was horrible. Corregidor, Guadalcanal, Iwo Jima. It was unbelievable. So it had to be done, and it was done. And that's where it begins. The first question I wanted to ask both these guys, and I actually interviewed them separately about 3 months apart. They came through, and I got to interview Teller twice. But the second time I got about 25 minutes. He was not in a hurry, but I pretty much asked everything I wanted to. He was real good about it. They all liked the idea I was a philosopher, did philosophy. They loved that part. But as a journalist, I remember Ralph Nader. He always remembered me after that. Every time I'd see him after that, he'd be like, "How's philosophy treating you?" About the same as it's treating you, Ralph. And it's wild when you think, after you got to know some of these guys, it's like they're just like the rest of us, guys. Everybody's just like us, There's a different forte, a different strength, of something else. Everybody's good at something. Everybody's great at something. But anyway, Teller, I was talking to Edward Teller, and I asked him right away. I said, "So what was the mindset while you were building the atomic bomb?" And he said the same thing Fermi said, 3 months later. It was about the science. It was about the chance to work with the greatest minds to make something that had not occurred, that they knew could happen. And going through it as science. And at Los Alamos, they built houses for the scientists and the professors. Robert Oppenheimer was in charge of this, and Oppie, as they called him, and they, Teller and Enrico Fermi, both confirmed that Oppenheimer was pure science, all about it, moving it forward, very organized, knew how to do it in his head, able to share it, and it worked very well. Now, side note here, in Los Alamos, because they were so far out, they brought their families, wives, and children and had a school and all these things. But, you know, statistically, families had a lot of alcoholism and trouble in the families because of the environment. It was so kind of sterile. You're in a sort of a camp area, you know, and it was hard on the people living there. And of course, the scientists, professors, you know, the doctor, they worked all the time, so as much as they could. Now, so Teller and Fermi both told me, and especially, like I said, Teller tells me the most. He says, you know, when he was told he was going to do it, he said there was a thought about life and death, but then I realized the war was already engaged, and there was no other way. So he said it was just a brief moment and then get to work. So it's good to understand science was not vengeful at this point. That was a given. All bets were off after Pearl Harbor's attack and those 3,000 plus people dying and suffering, and a lot more than that. There were survivors who didn't fare so well in the attack. I guess this is like time for a commercial. When I blow $1 on a bottle of water, I drink Perrier. Robin Williams. On vinyl it was. Reality, what a concept, from Robin Williams. What a guy Robin Williams was, as you all know. So humorous. Robin. They treated him like a clown. Yeah. Treated him like a monkey on a string, really. He knew it. He has his own problems, but the sad end to a great life, great actor. And I don't know, as comedy and tragedy go together, who knows? You know, maybe it's supposed to happen. I can't believe it, but that's how it looks. So anyway, that ends the commercial, right? Excuse me. So it was about high-minded science and getting this done. Excuse me, when they were first splitting the atom to even get up to the Trinity test, people were exposed, radiation, sickness, death, resulted instant death almost. Radiation sickness, you'd last a few days. Radiation sickness, there is no cure. It's a horrible way to go. Basically, you bleed from every orifice and die. It's a horrible, horrible death. And, you know, maybe it doesn't get spoke about because it's so horrible, but maybe people should speak about it so they understand what the hell happens. So the reality is, as I always say, science prevailed. And at the Trinity test, and you can see on YouTube, there, you know, original copies of the test at Trinity, you know, at Los Alamos. And obviously the people in range of it were radiated. There's no doubt about it. You know, cancer was rampant, and I do believe Oppenheimer died from cancer, but you know, they all smoked a lot, and I don't know, these things people say. Some people, you know, it's like, I had an uncle smoke till he was 85 years old, been smoking since he was 12. You know, there's always a case outside of it. And but it's like John Wayne and them, you know, they say they got radiation in the desert when they were on some of those movies out in that area. And, you know, of course, cancer for John Wayne, you know, and as well, although he beat it at one point. But the reality was, you know, they try to blame it on this or that, cigarettes or radiation, you know, take your pick. You gotta live in your own skin and deal with your own afflictions as they come. Generalizing is not well. And when it comes to the atomic bomb, I digressed a little. When it comes to the atomic bomb, the exposure off that explosion was one thing, but we should look at after the war, in 1947-8, it began at Bikini Atoll in the Pacific, and this is out by the Marshall Islands and Guam and that. And the Bikini Atoll, Bikini Islands are there. I think there were about 800 Bikinians living there when we went there. And we decided this was a good place to test atomic bombs in the ocean to kind of settle the radiation factor. And the atoll is round, a sunken island, and it works perfect. So we relocated. It was smart science that did it under the circumstances, but the radiation will be enormous here shortly. And we moved the Bikinians to another island off of Bikini in safe range, and we said, and it was interesting. I remember when they moved them there, I read that and saw a video eventually that when we moved the Bikinians to the other island, they didn't realize it, and they couldn't deliver food there. There was no easy way to bring a ship to the island and leave food, and I was like, oh my God! So we took the Bikinians off their island, where they're eating crabs and coconut, and move them over to another island and give them, you know, Spam and Coca-Cola, and that's how it worked. And then we couldn't deliver it, you know. And you see a huge Spam trend in Hawaii. Look at it, you know. That's why salted pork, salted pig, you know, it works. For some, if you can't get it any other way, I guess that's the way you have it. Now, so there's an ethical question about what we did to the Bikinians. Because in 1976 or 7, I believe, 60 Minutes went back. I remember this very well when I saw it. And the bikini was still hot. The coconuts were white, you know, not brown. And the island was still radiated, you know. It was unbelievable. Geiger counter going off, you know, all those years later. And the test went from the late 40s until about 56 or 7. We exploded up to a 30 megaton hydrogen bomb there. From like a 3 megaton up at the beginning, all the way to a 30 megaton hydrogen bomb there. And so now Bikini is a dive park. You can go there and scuba dive, and it's wild. But in the middle, after the war, during this 10 years of testing from the 40s to the 50s, we did like over 100 atomic tests there. And the very first one, we anchored 100 ships inside the atoll. And then we dropped like a 5 megaton there, thinking to see the devastation and what could happen. And only like a few ships at the very center sunk. But it radiated the whole area. And I saw interviews with sailors who went in there on ships, and they tried to rinse the radiation down with salt water, seawater. So it would be somewhat effective, but a ridiculous counter idea. But it's all done. And guess what? A lot of those naval men got cancer too. Radiation, you got to see the statistics. It's all there. Once again, ethics fails, although we had to do it, I guess. Part of the Cold War buildup. Or at the center and build up. And so the reality was a lot of unethical things had to happen to be able to bring nuclear weapons into being. But I know in the idea of Teller, he would say that nature provided it. We figured out how to put it together. It had to be used to save lives in the long run because the senseless killing was going to continue. And that's how they looked at, you know, formulating the first atomic bomb. Pure science for humanity. And with all the side ethical, inhumane issues, I think it's horrible what happened to the Bikinians. although they've now been allowed to return. And at the dive park, you can go down on a number of wrecks, but when they exploded all those ships, or tried to, they put live ammo on a lot of them. So there are live shells and bullets on a number of these ships that are sunk, which are off limits. The Navy goes in, demolitions and practices are used to there. But there's a number of ships that are still sunken in an area off limits that have live ammunition on them. So it's amazing. If you want to look at, I tell my students in ethics class, if you want to look at all sides of it, and you need to look at all sides of it, there's a lot of unethical things going on in the world to get something good done, like to stop a war. Ironic, isn't it? I hope y'all have a good Saturday and a good weekend. Peace out, y'all. Take care.